Welcome back for another book review. Today we're talking about this one. So we've got The Supernatural, Witches and Wicca by Audrey Alexander. It is a small book. It's like the size of a kid's book. It feels like a kid's book, but it's not. It's actually much more like actual kind of book. Kinda. So this book walks you through a little bit. It's this size. There's not much you can do, but there's a little bit of information about like what is witchcraft and what is Wicca, and it goes through the history and kind of a timeline a little bit, and then a little bit of the modern beliefs and modern practices. Again, emphasis on little because it is a tiny book. Surprisingly, I gave it a 4 out of 5. To be honest, I went into this book fully expecting that this was going to be a terrible book, that it was going to suck, and that I would not like it because, again, it's small, like really small, and, you know, just the cover's kind of, I don't know, it was giving like Nat Geo kind of vibes of like, like we'll kind of try, but like I had low expectations. But actually it's a really good one. So this book definitely, I can't emphasize enough, it's a small book. It is smaller than the Pagan Portals books. It is a tiny book, but it does cover the information, and I think for people like outside looking in, this is a fantastic resource. Also potentially for kids a little bit older, maybe like late elementary years, early like teen years, tween years, because like the verbiage and stuff is not like little kid friendly. But also, like, I'm gonna be real, there's plenty of adults who if you hand them like Thorn Mooney's latest book, the Witches Among Us one, they're not gonna read it. That's too much. Like most people are not gonna sit down and read an entire book just to learn what you believe. If you hand them this and you're like, bro, you can read this in like 5 minutes, depending on reading skill, maybe 20. Like, it's not gonna take you long. It's a really fast book. They might actually do it. Are they gonna feel a little silly because it does feel like a kid's book? Yes, I'm not gonna lie. It's a very, very kid's book, but it's actually got a lot of really good information. This way, I feel like when you get presented the information, you don't get overwhelmed because, again, a lot of people who are outside of our community, when you're like, what is a witch? And you hand them a big thick book, they're gonna be like, well, I don't care like that much. And so it's nice to have some of these smaller ones where like you're gonna need to use your own judgment on like who these people will be. There's plenty of people that I know that like if you hand them like an average size book, they'll probably read it. But I also know the people that are gonna be like, oh my god, why? And then if you hand them this that's like tiny, you're like, I feel like you can read this, then like a little bit of shame will get them to actually read it because it's literally the size of a kid's book. If you can't get through a kid's book, you've got a problem. And so it's kind of your discretion. But it's like, it just gently walks you through the history of witchcraft, a little bit on the ancient world, a lot of it on like, you know, the crazy witch trials and all of that crap that we had to deal with, and then a little bit into the modern where we've got Gerald Gardner and the Witchcraft Act and all of that, and just like gathering at Stonehenge. Like there's a little bit in here. It doesn't go into a whole lot of detail. It also did include the thingy thing from the, I think it was the 70s? I actually don't remember when it was. Maybe it'll say if I could find the page, because again there's not like a whole lot. Okay, the Principles of Wiccan Belief. This was the Principles of Wiccan Belief, or 13 Principles by the Council of American Witches in the early 70s. But we've got these. I don't agree with them all, to be perfectly honest, because like there's, where was it? We value sex as pleasure, as the symbol and embodiment of life, and as one of the sources of energies used in magical practice and religious worship. Hard pass. I still need to work on my Ace Witch book because we exist. I'm sure there's not that many, maybe not even 100 of us in the world, but I refuse to think I'm the only one. There's gotta be others out there, and at the very least there might be some born later. We exist. Stop it. Just, again, with sex always having to be like, oh my god, because we're the opposite of the Christians and all of these other religions. It's like the pendulum swung too hard the opposite direction. Anyways, But yeah, it was interesting to read through because like you don't see that very often in books, to be honest. I think that's the first time I've ever seen it. Maybe I had it one other time, maybe, but it's not frequently brought up. But it's like the court case written up thing to make Wicca a religious like entity of sorts to the US government. So it was kind of, it's an important part of our history, especially like American witches. I assume there's something equivalent in other places, but that's what we got here. I was also really surprised how well this book was written because the author in her bio at the end is like very adamant, like, Aubrey Alexander is not a witch. And you're like, okay, that's a strong opening sentence on a book that you just wrote on witches. That's cool. But yeah, she's apparently not, but handled our beliefs and our history and our story very well for someone who's not part of our community. There's been a few of those, like the, was it Toil and Trouble that I read like sometime this winter? I cannot for the life of me remember if it was this year or last year, but like pretty sure it was that one, that they weren't witches but they handled us with such care. That's kind of how this one felt, and it was really nice to have an author who, even if they're not part of our community, handled our community with care. I would recommend this book if you have older kids or like early teen, tween era, and maybe you're just starting to introduce this into your household, or you've waited a while to like really introduce it to them, or just like if it's a topic you want to discuss with them even though they already know about it. Like this just gives them a little bit more detail. Again, not too big. That's why it's like late kid, early teen, because like I started reading like the normal witchcraft books like Cunningham, Silver Ravenwolf, like the big names when I was like 13 to 15. So I don't know, and I could have been like above reading average because I read a lot of books, but I also had other fellow teen witches who were also reading those. So I'm kind of assuming that we're gonna go a little below that age range and be like, all right, maybe like 13's like the tail end-ish, and like instead it's more like 8 to 12. Again, depending on maturity, but I think this would be a good one to sit down and have your kids read through. It's also not overwhelming. It's a small book. And then if you do like a system to help them to encourage reading, this is an easy one to get through. I would also recommend it, like I mentioned, if you know somebody who's not going to be down to read a huge book, but you want them to have a little bit of information on us, or they might not have a really high reading level. That happens at any age. Like, there's just certain people that don't read, or they, you know, like learning disabilities and stuff. You don't want to hand someone who struggles to like physically read a book and be like, here's like a 300-page book, read this. That's a lot. They might be more willing to pick up this and be like, all right, I can power through that much, because it still might take them some time, but they'll get like the gist and not feel overwhelmed. So if you know people like that, or you have someone who's really impatient and just doesn't have the patience to sit down and read a book, this is a good starting place just to give them an idea of what we are. Because again, this is just a super brief intro, but sometimes we need these kinds of books. So I would love to know your thoughts on this one in the comments down below. As always, a huge thank you to my patrons. If you would like to support me and get access to a bunch of stuff, my first Witching Weekly went up last week. So if you want to check it out, we've got weekly inspiration, weekly musing, witchy musing, and then a card pull for the week. So if you want to check it out, it's over on Patreon. I also have other book reviews that are exclusive over there, and then my audiobooks and just some random vlogs and chit chats. So head over to Patreon, check out all that stuff. If you want to buy my books, they are always linked down below. And of course, if you've made it to the very end, that has helped me the absolute most. Thank you for coming along. I hope you enjoy chatting about books. Nobody gets to the end anyways, so you're never gonna know that I mispronounce words. Thank you for coming along as we chat about books. That's not a good start. I already have 2 more videos to record and I'm already stumbling on words. And I'm actually gonna be social today, so I'm gonna go hang out with people for the first time in a long time. And of course, it's at the time I'm breaking out, because that's what happens when I stress. And shocking, injured dog and funeral in the same week is stressful. So it's gonna be great to be like, hi, I haven't seen you in a long time. Hello, hi. Also, I'm still 15, I guess. Anyways, till next time, thank you for making it to the end, and blessed be.